Hi, everybody. Mark DeJesus here, and I want to take a few moments to just share with you about how to keep yourself from being a hypocrite. And I want to share some important points and aspects that I think can be an encouragement to you, because we live in a culture where there is so much emphasis on the outside that it can be very easy to neglect what's on the inside. And if you take the word hypocrite and we were to kind of simplify it in definition, it's someone who presents something on the outside that is not consistent with what's on the inside. And Jesus ran into this in the culture and time that he lived in, and it was especially prominent in the religious culture, because what they had done is taken the things of God and put an emphasis on the outward. Now, we, in our modern culture, we tend to look at the Pharisees and go, yeah, those Pharisees, they were crazy, and, you know, that pharisaical religious spirit mindset. And what we don't realize is we still fall into the same traps. We fall into repackaged forms of many of the same things that they lived in, because we attach certain things with appearance, success, outward, and we neglect the inward. We put a lot of attention to the striving for success. I mean, think about your family. How much emphasis is more on how your family looks than how well your family is actually doing? How much emphasis is more on how your job performance is rather than the life of the heart? You see, we've been taught with the pressure and the urgency of what is outputted, what people see. So that's where we spend our lives, whether it's on social media or interaction or just in our daily life. We spend so much time on the outward, we neglect the inward. And so addressing the hypocrite really cannot happen unless we change the emphasis of where we're truly investing our energy. The problem is that when you invest on the life of the heart, you don't get that feedback return as quickly as you do when you emphasize the outward. When you emphasize the outward and success and achievement and this and that, you get that applause, you get the golf claps, you get that feedback, and then you want more and more of it. That's why I talk so much about exposing the rejection mindset, because rejection fuels a hypocrisy world where we perform. We live for the outward, but we're not investing on the inward. And if you look up even where Jesus, called out hypocrite when he talked about the neglecting what's in your own eye while you point out somebody else, that word hypocrite means an actor, a stage player, or a performer. And that's why I address performance-driven Christianity so much, because it fuels a sense of hypocrisy where it emphasizes making sure the outside is invested in the most. And so we're looking to results, achievement, how things appear. But deep down inside, everyone struggles with feeling like a fraud. That if people really knew what's on the inside, what's really going on, they wouldn't love you, they wouldn't like you, and they wouldn't maybe give you the affirmation that you're getting. Which is not true, but the problem is we have a culture that reinforces a hypocrisy, or oftentimes psychological term, the imposter syndrome, where deep down you feel like an imposter. And there's two reasons for that. One is that we are taught to value a shiny presentation, and if we look inside, we realize, wow, there's a lot of stuff here that I haven't learned how to love myself with God's love and grace. I've listened to a rejection mindset. And then two, the culture reinforces it. It reinforces what you need to show in appearance rather than living without that pressure, just living vulnerably, living authentically. So we can tend to fall into the same patterns the Pharisees fell into. The problem with the Pharisees is they carried such a pride with it, an impenetrable persona of we've got it all together. And we carry a lot of that in our modern culture of how do we present that? We present that in the form of, I don't really have issues. Or you present a world of I'm doing fine. Everything's fine. Everything's good. And you work hard to keep that presentation together. But I believe there's a remnant of people that are saying, you know what? I'm tired of this hypocrisy thing, this imposter syndrome working against me, this feeling like a fraud. How do you break through that and not let it own your life? I have a couple thoughts I want to share with you. But the first stage you got to get through, number one, is you got to learn to be okay with vulnerability, to exercise your own vulnerability. Being vulnerable says, hey, I'm headed in some great directions. I'm learning. I've not arrived. And it really comes across in the way you share your own issues. Take a step back and ask yourself, do I come across in a way where I'm communicating as though I've already arrived? Or are you communicating stuff in a way that says, hey, I'm on my own journey. I'm trying to figure this stuff out too. Let me just share with you with what I've learned. When was the last time that you were vulnerable with somebody? When was the last time that you shared vulnerably? Hey, I'm struggling. Hey, here's some things I'm going through. Because when you are vulnerable, it welcomes other people to take the journey with you. That's the key. First step. But this takes humility. This takes like humbling yourself and letting down that survival mechanism that I've got to be, because some of you have come into agreement with some of your successes rise on you having to present yourself in a certain way. And maybe God needs to help you break that down so that you can learn to be a more vulnerable person, more relatable, where people can take the journey with you. Number two it's connected to number one, is just be honest about your own weaknesses. Be honest about the areas where you realize you struggle. Now, I've been captivated by Paul in his writings where he talks about the thorn in the flesh, the messenger of Satan that came, and he's praying to God, and God gives him a message back. It says, my grace is here, and I'm not going to operate with you in this by your typical formula. And Paul says, I rejoice in my weaknesses. And I got to be honest with you, I'm still learning. What does it look like? What does it mean to rejoice in your weakness? What does it really look like to take those areas that are battlegrounds, that are struggles, and actually throw a party over them? Rejoice is the word that he used. Like, man, we don't know how to do that at all. We celebrate, our victories and strengths. And I'm killing it in this area. To rejoice in your weakness. To rejoice in those areas that are still being formed and worked out, and areas that feel like a thorn or feel like a limp, or areas that, man, these really bring you to your knees. Are you coming more to terms with them? Because when you come to more terms with understanding those areas for yourself, then what happens is you start to give that to others. And number three is create safety with other people sharing their weaknesses. I've been in situations where I've taken a step of vulnerability and shared something. Maybe it's in my fathering, or maybe marriage, or maybe just in my own walk with another man. And I can't tell you how many times a response of another man saying, first thing they say, yeah, I don't really struggle with that. I want to take the table and flip it over and go, are you kidding me? That's the most unsafe thing to say to somebody who's sharing a struggle in their life. Your response to what other people share is critical. It shows whether you live with an inner Pharisee or not. Your response to other people's sins, your response to other people's battlegrounds, your response to other people's suffering. Do you always go to just kind of fixing people, giving them cliche advice, or kind of, reeling back like, ooh, you struggle with that? That reveals the inner Pharisee that you live with, is in your response to how other people share. So how do you really get rid of the Pharisee? Is be sober on working on your own issues. When you see other people struggling, you realize, you know what? I could struggle with that very same thing in my own life. If I'm not careful, that's where Paul said in Galatians, he said, when someone else is caught in a trespass, restore him in a spirit of meekness, but realize you could get caught up in the very same battle yourself. People who get rid of the inner Pharisee see other people's battles and go, man, I could get caught in that same thing too. And it humbles you and puts you in a posture not of judgmentalism, but of sobriety. The moment you act like you don't have any battles in your life is the moment the Pharisee creates a self-righteous world in your mind where I look at some believers, and I got to be honest, the way they act, it's like they don't even need Jesus. You got like a standard of righteousness and everything's good, and you don't even need his help and his empowerment and his healing work in your life. So there's a scripture that Jesus brought out that I think is important to pay attention to help get rid of because part of really getting rid of the hypocrisy in our lives, the imposter syndrome, is getting rid of judgmentalism. And we judge others usually because we're harsh towards ourselves, but then we hide it where we're harder on other people, but yet we look at our own issues and go, yeah, and we dismiss them. Jesus said this, judge not that you be not judged. For with the judgment you used, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you. Jesus is basically saying this. He's saying, however you judge and evaluate other people, I'm going to use that same lens towards you. That's intense. So if you look at someone else's struggle and you condemn them and you're harsh on them and you come across and just beat them over with your words or your perspectives, I'm going to do the same thing with you. See, we want full grace for us, but we want punishment for others. And Jesus is going, if you want it for you, exercise it in how you see other people. Because he says, why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but don't consider the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me remove the speck from your eye, and look, a plank is in your own eye? Hypocrite! First remove the plank from your own eye. How do we break hypocrisy? We work on our own issues. And in our interaction with others, it's not like you have to back up the truck and tell everyone your problems. That's not what I'm saying. Is that you convey you're in process too. And you be a help out of what you're working on in your own life. Because trust me, if you spend enough time working on your own issues, you'd be like, man, I don't even have time to be judging others. I got my own stuff I'm working on. It puts a humility in your heart that welcomes other people to join in with you and to work on the journey together. Number 4, with that, this is key. With that in mind, and people say, man, I'm still condemned. I'm still struggling. It's simple. Just lead others into the same direction you're headed. That's all you got to do. Say, here's where I'm going. Here's where I find myself going to. Don't share with others things where you're not headed yourself. That helps you to break out of the hypocrisy. Or even share, hey, this is something that I know I need to do and I'm not doing it. And you know what? As I'm listening to you, I'm realizing I need to work on this too. Boy, that creates a humble posture to welcome others into a process of transformation. Number 5, feed others what you're eating. Give the bread that you're feeding on. This is where authentic, non-hypocritical ministry is going to come into place. I remember the day and the time where I stopped trying to come up with sermons when I was a pastor, or I stopped trying to come up with teachings. And instead, I just got hungry about God transforming my own life. And all I did was share out of the things he was doing in my life. Now you don't have to feel like a hypocrite because you're only teaching out of what you're learning in. Make that the basis and the foundation of all that you do to impact others, all the ministry that you give out to others. Stop trying to come up with things that you present. And pastors, church leaders, stop teaching people stuff that you're not doing yourself. Like, just stop. Just halt that and focus in on where is God growing you, and then teach out of that. Teach your family out of what God's doing in you. Teach in your marriage, in your children, in your family, in your community, at your job, as you teach others. Share with them what you're working on and what's helping you. In the marketplace, in your church. Now we're getting into authentic impact because you're not sharing stuff. That's just my personal rule. I'm not going to share it as something God hasn't processed in my own life or is in the work of processing. You don't have to feel like you arrived. I'll get to that in a second because you're never arriving. We're all on a journey. But continue to seek what is God working on in my life, and that's the most powerful ministry you can share with others, is what he's revealing in your life, and you're handing that out. Number 6 is have compassion on other people's battles. Without compassion, you're not going to see other people's journeys and their struggles the way that you need to see them. When you tune into compassion for other people, you also tune into the narrative of God's heart for that person. And now you're going to hear better. When you tune into judgmentalism, and I've done it, where you look at somebody and you lump them up in your mind and you go, oh man, I'm coming under that judgmentalism. I just did it the other day. I was at the pool with my kids and there was a guy there and I was just judging him in my mind and I did it unchecked, right? And out of nowhere, he comes over to me, introduces himself to me. It was hot out. He offered a cold beverage to me and introduced it, gave his name. And I went, oh, in my mind, I said, oh, if you only knew, I had some judgmental thoughts about you. I don't even know you. And here you are showing compassion to me. It humbled my heart because I had gotten into just a spin of some like self-hating, self-judgmental thoughts. And I was spewing it out on him. Without compassion, you won't see people the way God sees them. So realign yourself, and if you're engaging a relationship or a situation, God, I need compassion first. I cannot hear anything you're saying about somebody unless I engage it with compassion. Now, the last thing I think is important is realize that you and everyone else, you are in the work of practicing. I remember when I was pastoring a small church, and a woman came up to me after service because I was giving an exhortation about taking your journey and impacting others and helping others. And she said to me, well, I don't feel like I should because I feel like I'm a hypocrite and I feel like I'm struggling. So if I tell others things, I feel like I'm performing. And so because I haven't arrived, I feel like I'm performing. I said, you're not. If you recognize, hey, I'm still struggling, then come out of that place. Share out of that place that people will know you haven't arrived and you're not performing, you're practicing. Now, when doctors go through their training, what do we say that they start? A practice. Now, if you really think about that, that's kind of scary, right? That he's practicing. But even his professional work, they call it a practice. And I think that's interesting because you and I are practicing who we are. And if you don't give yourself room to practice it out, then you're always going to be under the lens of condemnation. Like, I'm not going to figure out who I am and then really live it. I'm going to figure it out in the action, in the failures, the mistakes, I need a reboot. I got to figure this thing out. Now you're getting the accuser off your back because Satan is the accuser of the brethren. He's always accusing you on where you haven't arrived and where you're not feeling like you're measuring up. And he doesn't let you practice because that's where the power is in the learning and the practicing with God. Many of you are like stuck in your heads and in perfectionism. You need to realize I need to give myself permission to practice, to work this out, knowing I haven't arrived. And I want to give that freedom to other people. As a place of action, get your copy of Exposing the Rejection Mindset because this will help break off the hypocrisy that's fueled by performance-based living. And you can go to my website, got lots more resources, podcast materials. Send me your feedback and your question. What helps you to break off hypocrisy in your own life? And I want to be an encouragement to your life and to your journey. And just know I'm in my own journey of healing and freedom. And what I've learned and what God's shown me, I'm just sharing with you. I pray it's a blessing to your life. I pray it's a blessing to your journey. And I look forward to encouraging you with more and more materials that can help you in your healing and freedom walk.